Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this hearing. My name is Eileen Duff. I am the home counselor, and I am pleased to be the chair for our nominee, Joanna Rodriguez. I will read the letter from the governor dated September 16th. Dear counselors, I am pleased to nominate Joanna Rodriguez to the position of Associate Justice of the Juvenile Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. So let us begin with, and I will introduce the councilors as they speak, just to make it a little bit easier since some of us are remote. And Attorney Rodriguez, would you like to tell us who your first witness is and have them come to testify? We can't hear the attorney.
My first witness?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, Counselor Duff. My first witness is ADA Timothy Prather.
Terrific.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, attorney.
Good afternoon, counselors. My name is Timothy Prather. I am an assistant district attorney for Essex County. What I would like to say to the council is the mission of the Juvenile Court is to protect children from abuse and neglect, to strengthen families, to rehabilitate juveniles, and protect the public from delinquent and criminal behavior. Having this in mind, defense attorneys and prosecutors working in an adversarial environment need to come together to achieve the best possible outcome. I've worked alongside Attorney Joanna Rodriguez for almost 9 years, both in the district and juvenile courts. Her practical knowledge on a wide range of legal subjects will serve her well as a juvenile justice. She has defended juveniles on both misdemeanors and serious felonies. Whether it's a minor criminal delinquency matter or a youthful offender, Attorney Rodriguez has exhibited knowledge, skilled advocacy to the court on behalf of her clients. A prosecutor and defense attorney may not always see eye to eye when it comes to a criminal case. Each attorney may use a different lens to determine the best possible outcome. In my career as an assistant district attorney, although we may have disagreed on many issues, Attorney Rodriguez has always displayed good moral character, making it easier to effectively communicate with her and eventually the court. We were always able to talk through things. We evaluated our cases, discussed strengths and weaknesses with one another, and oftentimes we would agree with one another, but sometimes we did not. In the end, Attorney Rodriguez was always professional and reasonable in our discussion and argued zealously on behalf of her client. Communication from the bench comes both verbally and non-verbally. Finding a way to do what is right on each and every case comes with proper training as an attorney. In this regard, Attorney Rodriguez is particularly well prepared. The respect and admiration she receives from everyone in the courthouse, in addition to her character, makes her the perfect choice for the juvenile bench. Attorney Rodriguez has the right judicial temperament to preside in the juvenile court.
Yes, sir.
She is gifted with patience, open-mindedness, and has the ability to apply the facts to the law. I believe she has the courage to do what the law requires, although it may not be the popular choice. Sure. Some juveniles make bad decisions as young teenagers and find themselves before the court on a delinquency matter. Oftentimes, intervention like a proper diversion program can get the juvenile back on track. Sometimes, however, they find themselves post-indictment as a youthful offender, facing serious consequences that impact the safety of the community. Attorney Rodriguez will unquestionably decipher what is right in both instances. Attorney Rodriguez's integrity is beyond reproach and will undoubtedly serve her well. Those intrinsic morals will undoubtedly follow her as she becomes a judge. It is an honor, my distinct pleasure to be called upon here today, and I thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony and for coming in. Do any of the councilors have questions for the witness?
I do.
All right.
I do as well.
You are recognized.
I can't hear you, Eileen.
You are recognized.
Oh, thank you. Sir, could you tell me how long you've been in the DA's office?
Yes, sir. I've been an assistant district attorney for almost 9 years now.
And where do you currently work out of?
The Lawrence Courthouse for the Eastern District. I work both in the district courts and supervisor of the juvenile court.
And how long have you been a supervisor?
Going on 2 years now.
So, you have worked with the nominee for 9 years?
My entire career as an assistant district attorney, I have worked with Attorney Rodriguez. Yes, sir.
How many, have you had any trials with her?
I think we have had a trial in the district court. We haven't had one in the juvenile court.
Well, how many cases have you had with her in the juvenile court?
We had a collective, the majority of cases we had were youthful offender cases. I would say probably dozens of cases in the juvenile court over the course of the last few years.
A dozen cases over the last few years?
That's probably correct, sir.
So you haven't interacted with her in the juvenile court for the entire 9 years?
No, sir. Prior to becoming the juvenile court supervisor for our office, I found myself rarely in the juvenile court.
And that was for the last 3 years or 2?
Approximately 2 years, sir.
Okay. So how many cases have you had with her in the district court?
Probably countless. We don't assign the amount of cases that come through that building. A lot of them do get assigned. We had cases together, and collectively in our office had a lot of interaction with one another in the prosecution of
Well,
cases.
give me an estimate of how many trials you had with her in the district court.
I'm sorry, sir, did you say pre-trials or trials?
No, trials.
Trial matters, answering on those cases. I think I tried one case in the district court with Attorney Rodriguez, and countless evidentiary motions and hearings.
What kind of hearings?
Whether they're evidentiary motions to suppress, that we found ourselves arguing 58As and the like.
Okay, just trying to nail you down. When you say countless, well, estimate how many times you had a motion with her that you described.
I would say probably dozens, easily dozens of cases.
And in the juvenile court, did you have any trials with her?
I did not, sir.
Did you have any motions with her?
Yes.
What kind of motions were they?
Either evidentiary motions, a lot of times in the juvenile court, motions to dismiss. A lot of motions are heard on a lot of cases preliminarily at arraignment sessions, and subsequently motions to dismiss and the like.
Do you have any jury trials with her in the juvenile court?
No, sir.
In the district court?
Yes.
How many?
I can think of one that we had together in the district court.
What kind of a case was that?
I figured that was the next question. I apologize. I can't remember exactly the factual scenario of the case. But we found ourselves quite often in the jury room. And for whatever reason, either the case didn't go that day or perhaps a resolving of the case.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.
Madam Chair? Eileen,
Yes,
may I be recognized?
yes, you may be recognized,
Thank you.
Counselor.
You didn't bring any of your files with you. Maybe we can work some things out today? Just a thought. I'm all set. I'm just kidding.
Thank you, sir.
You're all set.
Any other counselors have questions? Counselor Devaney?
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Of course. Thank you, Council.
So, how many years have you worked closely with this nominee? I mean, besides the cases and everything, do you meet with her over cases or follow-ups or anything?
So communication between defense and prosecution is key. And I think it's beneficial for both parties before a hearing, any kind of a hearing, whether it's pretrial motion or whatever, to meet beforehand and discuss your case, whether it's a discovery or anything of that matter.
Well, I thank you for what you do. I can't even imagine, the cases that you see. And it's sad because in the society, we're seeing more child abuse cases. And it's really upsetting how different the society is from when I was growing up. We didn't hear of all these things, So tell me, can you give me a few adjectives to describe this nominee that attributes that she brings to the bench?
Professionalism, courteous, politeness, ease of being able to have a conversation with her. As I indicated, there's always conversation between the defense and prosecution, or there probably should be. And you don't always see eye to eye, but at the end of the day, you both have a job to do. And Attorney Rodriguez and I both have always recognized that.
Is there any particular case that that you always look back on that you saw the nominee and what you did, that made an impression on you?
Particularly youthful offender cases for the juvenile court. There was one individual that was charged with felonies, obviously, and Attorney Rodriguez did a lot of work on the case, and we talked because there was an immense amount of discovery on the case, and had some different types of avenues to pursue. And there's complexities, as just with every case, there are complexities sometimes, and Attorney Rodriguez and I had met several times on the case and discussed it just about every time we saw each other.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else
Madam
for
Chair.
questions?
Madam Chair, I
Any other
don't have
one?
any questions. This is Counselor Hurley.
Thank
My
you, Counselor.
internet went out again, so I'm now hearing by phone.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, you may step away, witness, and are there any other witnesses?
Duff. My second witness is the Honorable Jose Sanchez.
Thank you, Attorney.
Good afternoon, councilors. I am retired Justice Jose Sanchez from the Juvenile Court, and I thank you all for your time and allowing me to speak today on behalf of Attorney Rodriguez. She has practiced before me for at least 10 years, and I am here to attest to her calm demeanor under stress, her poise in confronting adversity, and her patience in a busy urban courtroom. She is a vigorous student of the law. She is articulate when presenting her legal arguments, and her compassion and commitment to justice is unwavering. As a judge for 22 years in the Juvenile Court, I have seen countless attorneys practice before me, and as all of you can attest, only a handful have the gravitas necessary to assume the bench, to serve the Constitution and the law. I have no doubt that she will serve admirably as a juvenile court judge. I would proudly call her a colleague on the Juvenile Court, and I encourage you to vote yes on her nomination. Your confirmation will add another justice to the vision, or another justice with the vision to protect our communities, provide justice to victims, and assure defendants, juveniles, and parents in care and protection proceedings their rights to a fair trial, represented by counsel, and an opportunity to be heard in their defense. Attorney Rodriguez will serve the court, the community, and the law with distinction. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for appearing. Do any of the councilors have questions for the witness? Counselor Devaney.
Thank you for coming. With your experience, how many years?
I was on the juvenile court bench for 22 years, hearing delinquency cases, youthful offender cases, and care and protection cases. And because I had a dual designation, I would also cover the district court sessions when needed.
So you've seen a lot of changes with our society in the 22 years that you served.
I certainly have.
Yeah. What do you think that the change in the juvenile court that she's going to face in her being first on the bench compared to when you first served?
Well, when I first started, a lot of the cases that were presented, for example, in care and protection cases, were naturally cases of abuse, neglect due to drug addiction. And I think that that issue has only grown and become more severe in our society today. And I think that you need to take a dual approach. Naturally, you need to protect victims, you need to protect children, but at the same time, you also need to offer services to parents in order to remediate the situation that led to the abuse and neglect. And when I look at the attorneys that practiced before me, I often think, does this person have the balance of character, the balance to understand when a person needs a helping hand and when the priority needs to be the protection of our communities and of the children that come before us? It's a fine line. And from everything that I've seen from Attorney Rodriguez, I have no doubts that she'll be able to walk that line very, very well.
So it really is the drugs that have increased through the years from when you started that has, that obviously, plays a part in abuse and all of that. So I have said over and over that we need more drug treatment centers, not 24 hours, whatever I mean, drug centers. What have you seen over the years? There hasn't been that many that have been increased. We got 3.
There haven't been that many. You're absolutely right. However, I think that there are services that judges can tailor that will address the issues of the parents or the juveniles or the youthful offenders in order to be able to treat the drug addiction. Because naturally, it's not just the drug addiction that leads to their own downfall, to their own inability to provide for their children, but it leads to violence, it leads to other collateral consequences. And if you can have a judge on the bench, like Attorney Rodriguez, I expect will serve, if someone who can really identify what that person needs the most at that moment in their lives, I think she'll be able to craft either terms of probation or services through the Department of Children and Families that will be able to successfully address the needs of that parent while protecting the children that come before her.
Well, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the attorney. Is there one time when she came before you that made such an impression on you, her appearance before you?
There have been many cases, but I specifically remember one case, and I don't remember the charges, but I do remember that Attorney Rodriguez made a very compassionate argument. And realizing that in court, a defense attorney is standing up to say the prosecution, to the police, to probation, sometimes even the court, where you have to convince all of these parties that your position is just, that your position is fair, and that it will ensure justice, not just for the victims, but for the defendant as well. And I distinctly remember her presenting an argument that changed my mind completely. And I wish I could remember the details, but what she did is she presented a compassionate picture of the defendant, and the fact that that defendant had a lot of skills as long as he would be presented with the opportunity. And I remember crafting conditions of probation that were specifically tailored to that person. Unfortunately, I don't know what the end result was, but I do remember listening to her. And during the argument, there's very few attorneys that can actually capture, I think, the imagination of a judge in terms of where they want you, where the attorney wants you to be. Because oftentimes you read the case, you've heard the facts, you've heard the victims, so you develop an impression about what you think is a fair sentence. And then when the attorney comes up and presents their argument, I think an ability to be able to change your mind and to, more importantly, make you listen is a quality that is long lost. And I think she has that.
Right. Well, thank you for your service. I really, after 21 years, I'm sorry I didn't have the opportunity to vote for you, but the people that I have voted for, unfortunately, have retired or retiring. And sometimes we don't get the caliber of the people to replace those people, So I thank you for your service, and it's really a tribute to the nominee to have you speak for her today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair?
much.
Yes,
Madam Chair,
Counselor.
if I may? You said that lawyers get skilled at trying to figure out where, convincing the judge as to where they want the judge to be.
Yes.
You never figured out where I wanted it, did you? When I was in front of you?
I
I'm
always
getting a little
knew,
nervous now that maybe you did.
I
No,
always
never
knew where
mind.
you were going to take me, Counselor.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, you may step away. Thank you for your testimony. Attorney Rodriguez, do you have any more witnesses? Here you are. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. You need to get close to the microphone.
I said, Counselor Duff, I don't have any more witnesses. The only other person that I would like to introduce that's in the audience with me is my significant other, Rennie Carroll, who's sitting next to Judge Sanchez.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see him. Would you like to make your opening statement then?
Yes, Counselor Duff, thank you.
You're welcome.
First and foremost, I would like to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for this nomination. Being nominated is a tremendous honor, and I would like to thank you both for giving me the seat at this table. I would also like to thank all of you, Governor's Councils, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with me prior to today's hearing. Lastly, I would like to thank the JNC for the professionalism during the vetting process. Today, I am here seeking your support in my nomination. You all have had an opportunity to review my application and work experience, but those only describe a fraction of who I am. In considering my nomination, I ask that you also consider my life experiences, my dedication to the legal field, and my commitment to our youth, all things that have helped me form the person I am today. I am not the daughter of a doctor, a lawyer, or a judge. My parents were born in Puerto Rico and moved to South Jersey to make a better life for me and my two older brothers. Both of my parents worked nights, days, holidays in the casino industry. They worked hard and saved their money to purchase a house on an acre of land in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. My father quickly transformed our home into a small farm where we raised chickens, pigs, ducks, and rabbits. And I recall the value of working hard every morning to put food on the table. Growing up, I know I did not want to stay in South Jersey. And after graduating high school, I was accepted to Rutgers University. While attending Rutgers, I had an opportunity to intern for the New Jersey Public Defender's Office. As a small-town farm girl, my role as a bilingual investigator changed my life. It was during this internship that I realized the lack of racial and ethnic minorities in the legal profession. And while interviewing victims, witnesses, and sometimes defendants, I was overcome with a sense of gratitude that finally someone understood them. That is when I know this was my calling. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to make a change. I was going to be a lawyer. This journey to become a lawyer was not without challenge or setback. I graduated from Rutgers and was accepted to a law school in Massachusetts. I found an apartment for rent and arranged my move-in date with my new landlord. Filled with excitement, I packed my gold 1985 Toyota Corolla hatchback with all of my belongings, and I drove alone to Massachusetts, leaving my family behind. I knew very little about Massachusetts. I had no friends or family here. I never even visited the state, but that was not going to stop me. Upon my arrival, my landlord took a look at me and refused to rent the apartment. Still to this day, I don't know why, but with law school starting in a few days, I found myself homeless. In that moment, that should have been the most exciting time of my life. I had no place to sleep, no place to shower, no place to call home, but I refused to return to New Jersey. Quitting was not an option. After a few weeks of living in the car, I found an apartment in Lawrence, and I was so happy to finally find stability. I was eager to focus on law school without having to worry about where I was going to park and sleep that night. One morning, after a month of living in my new apartment, I woke up and my prized possession, my 1985 gold Toyota Corolla hatchback, was gone. It had been stolen. I was devastated, but determined to see my schooling through, I did not give up. I thank God for the love of and support of my family, because in just a few weeks, my aunt and my uncle purchased a car for me. With my car safe on the street, I focused my studies on law school, and just 6 months prior to sitting for the bar, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I knew that I had to be with him as his days were numbered, and after finishing my final exams, I packed some clothes and books and drove back to New Jersey. I studied for the bar exam by my father's hospital bedside, and sadly, he died a month prior to me receiving my results. The passing of my father was a tremendous loss in our family, but it brought me, my mother, and my two brothers closer together. As difficult as it is to lose a parent to cancer, that experience taught me that life is short, to be grateful for what I have, and not to take family for granted. Losing my father was the most difficult time in my life, and despite it all, I passed the bar on my first try. Since passing the bar, life has become easier. I'm the proud mother of two remarkable and handsome young men. My sons, Pablo and Jordan, have taught me to not anger easily, to be kind, patient, and compassionate. And while raising my boys, I continue to pursue my dream of becoming a judge while giving back to the community. Because of my own life experiences, it was always important for me to give back to the youth. I taught mock trials at 7th and 8th graders in the Lawrence Elementary Schools. I participated in the Boys and Girls Club as a big sister, Methuen Youth Baseball as a scorekeeper, Methuen Pop Warner as a team mom, and sat on the board of directors for the Methuen YMCA. My firsthand involvement in these organizations led me to witness the positive impact they have on our children. Working with youth, I would often hear from children complain about how they're not going to succeed because of who they are or where they're from. I would share my own story and serve as a role model, reminding them that anything is possible with drive and determination. My life experiences have made me compassionate, patient, respectful, and humble, and these are all the qualities a judge should have. Please support my nomination, not just because of my accomplishments, but also because of my life experiences, my dedication to the legal field, and my commitment to our youth. If given the honor, I look forward to serving the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as an Associate Justice of the Juvenile Court. I thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. Great statement. Let's start. Is Counselor Fiera on?
I believe he is at the moment.
No.
Okay,
not
that's
yet.
okay. I know there is some, Counselor Juvenile.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
I can't believe you came back to Massachusetts after everything happened to you like that.
I did.
That must be a flaw in you. That was quite a story.
Thank you.
Why do you think the landlord didn't rent to you after he saw you?
To be quite frank, his wife had showed me the apartment that day. I loved it, was ready to sign the papers, and when the husband came home, he said no. So I don't know why. I didn't ask, and I think being young at the time, hindsight as an attorney, I should have had a contract. I should have done things differently, but everything was done via email at that particular time and over the phone. But I had my move-in date, and I anticipated moving in.
Do you think there was any racial issue involved in his decision?
I wouldn't guess. I would say to you that we were both of different ethnicities.
Was he a white guy?
But yes,
So that must have been pretty hard for you to be told that by him.
it was. And I think the most difficult part was that law school was starting in a few days, and I needed to figure things out quickly.
Well, I give you credit for getting over those hurdles and everything that happened in that span of your life that kept you going. Oh, you've been practicing in our courts for a while, district and juvenile, and criminal matters, right?
That's correct.
Do you think there's systemic racism in our court system?
I have been fortunate to not have seen it personally. I've had wonderful judges that have been before my entire career. I haven't seen it,
Well,
but I believe it exists.
sure. I mean, a lot of us that grew up in the system and have been in it a long time never really recognized it in the beginning, and some of us still don't. But it's there, in my opinion, somehow embedded into our system. And the more I look at it and look back on it, the more I see things that I probably spoken up about when they happened. So there was a study done recently by the late Judge Gantz asking Harvard Law School to do that study, showing that Blacks and other minorities are incarcerated in our prison system with more of a sentence than somebody of white color. Do you agree with that finding?
I do.
So I have my own ideas on what we should do about it, but I'm always interested to hear from somebody who's going on the bench where this issue has now percolated to the point where it is becoming a daily discussion. So how do you as a future judge handle issues like that?
But I think it's twofold. Number one, I think diversion is important for all kids, regardless of what race they are. If they make one mistake, I don't think that they should be punished and have a criminal record for the rest of their life. Secondly, I think there was a recent SJC decision that came down, Commonwealth versus Laura, that discusses police officers stopping minorities while they're walking down the street with no probable cause to even stop. And I think that in itself is a change, because finally there's some light shed on how sometimes police officers may categorize people of color, whether they're driving or walking down the street, and stop them and interact with them. And I know as a defense attorney, it's been very difficult to bring that to light. And finally, the SJC decision that recently came down, I think that's been beneficial for at least causing awareness.
Have you represented a lot of minorities over your career?
Working in Lawrence, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon to see young kids in Lawrence and towns like Lawrence and cities like Lawrence in the Commonwealth that have a pretty good record accumulated by the time they reach 18, where you don't find that from white suburban towns to that extent. In fact, to me, it's a rarity when I see somebody that comes from a city like Lawrence, a minority person from Lawrence, parts of Boston, my own hometown of Holyoke, Mass. If I see somebody that's 20 to 25 that has no record, it's almost an oddity. It's unusual. And judges punish people in our court system because after they hear a case and a finding is made, or they do a plea, they look at the person's record. And somebody who's from a minority community that gets stopped and interacts with police a lot more than a white person would in a suburban community, they're subject to more punishment because of that record. You agree?
I agree that it happens, yes.
So if you were, when you become a judge, are you going to be aware of that issue?
Absolutely.
Are you going to punish somebody as a youngster that has a record from a minority community harsher than you would punish a white person from a white community?
If that was your initial question, then the answer to that would be no. But I thought
You're
your
going to
initial
look
question.
at the record and see that he has a record.
That's true, but we would take every case by a case basis, look at his background, look at his potential, look at the facts of the case. I think it all depends. What I would say, and kind of add on to what your statement is, I think a lot of affluent people, regardless of what race they are, tend to hire legal attorneys in advance during clerk's hearings. I see that often to avoid any type of record. Unfortunately, people that don't have the resources to hire an attorney early on are subject to the system. But I think one great thing that Governor Baker and the Polito administration have done was they implemented diversion, judicial diversion. There was a recent change in the reform bill for criminals, and I believe that that has been beneficial in order to avoid that from happening.
Well, I don't think a white juvenile in an upscale town like Weston or Wellesley, Massachusetts, is going to interact with police as much as a minority member of a community in Lawrence is going to interact with police. You mentioned it yourself. Police stop minorities more. They stop them walking on the street. They stop them driving an automobile, much more than they do in white affluent communities. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So why would you look at a record if you were a judge?
Well, I think you need to look at a record to see what type of offenses someone had committed before, whether or not they're a good candidate for probation. Sometimes when you're on probation and you have several violations that are on your record, then you can say maybe this person really isn't necessarily a good candidate for probation. Maybe we should explore something different. But I think there are a lot of factors that you should take into consideration, not just the record, but you should be taking into consideration other things, his accomplishments, his family support, whether or not there's an issue with addiction or drugs or alcohol. But it's not just the record. I think you have to look at the juvenile as a whole.
I've been doing this a lot longer than you, and I kind of grew up with records, look at records, look at records. I think I've come to the conclusion in my age now that we shouldn't look at records to determine what the punishment should be to somebody. We believe in this. You get charged with a crime, you get some sort of penalty, you pay your price to society, and it's supposed to be over. But we never let it be over in our court system. We always look at a record and punish somebody harsher because of that record. Why don't we just punish him for the crime that he's committed now? This progressive discipline has led to thousands and thousands of people being put into cages in our Commonwealth. Most of them minorities. That's what it's led to. Progressive discipline. You think that's fair and we should continue to do that?
Do I think that's fair? No, I think that I think not only the record, but they should look at other things with regards to each individual person.
Well, I hope when you're a judge, you don't look at the record. All of a sudden, you make it a point to say, I don't need to look at it. I know what the crime was committed. I want to hear what kind of a person this is, his background, his family. I want to hear all those things. I can sentence him without a record. Be a bold leader in that regard. We'll have less people sitting in cages in our Commonwealth and less minority members sitting there. I mean, it seems to me there's something wrong when half the people sitting in our jails and prisons are minority people and they make up less of the population than white people. So anyway, I think you're a good candidate, and be bold on the bench. Remember, nobody can fire you. You got the job till you're 70, okay?
Thank you.
Treat the
Thank you,
people in
Counselor.
Massachusetts decently that come before you.
I
They're
will.
paying for
Thank
all
you.
our salaries, and they'll be paying for yours shortly. Treat them good.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Councilor
you.
Juvenile.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councilor
Madam Chair.
Jubenville. Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you
It's been
too.
so long ago, I can't remember. But it was a pleasure, and it had to be over 4 hours, so I really got to know you. I do that for 21 years because I'm voting the whole person, not somebody on a paper. And I learned a lot about you and a lot in common. And interesting enough, first generation Italian immigrant family, parents. And when my dad came, he was with his sister and brother and mother and father, and they lived in East Boston. And my father never had more of an education than he did when he was 12 years old. That's how it was. And they didn't send him to school when he came to this country. Go out to work, bring money home, and that's how it was. And he had an abusive father. And when he was 18, he came to Watertown. They didn't allow Italians to work. My father gave up his language, his name, everything. And he went to court and changed his name from Petito to Peters. My name was Peters. And it always bothered me when I go to the cemetery. My dad's been gone 55 years. He was quite older than my mom. And it bothers me. And no one should take your name. And it always bothered me. So I went to court over 30 years ago, and I got my father's name for a middle name. And so I'm now Petito Devaney, not Peters. And I think of that, and I think of what people went through, and I did too. It went to the next generation. So I understand that, and it hurts, you know, and how wonderful you know Spanish. But my parents were so made fun of, discriminated against. They didn't want us to be made fun of. And I don't know one word of Italian, and I envy you. That's wonderful. And I think that is such an asset to bring to the court. You know, we really need that, especially with how the immigration, you know, has changed through the years. And we have so many people, Spanish-speaking people. So, and the other thing is, as far as the, you know, the court you're going to, I volunteered almost a year counseling juveniles on probation in court. And I think that was probably the greatest, that's decades ago, and that's probably the greatest education I ever got, because I lived in a little small world, and, you know, and I had 4 children. And, you know, you just stereotype juveniles, and you can't do that. And it took me a while. One at a time, I would meet with them and take them to lunch and everything. It took a long time to get that trust, and then to find out what their world was about. Mother's a prostitute. They don't know the father is locked in a bedroom when the mother went out. I learned so much. And I'll tell you, being here for 21 years, the most important court to me is juveniles, because I know, and I know how it's changed now. You know, we don't have the family. I guess the one good thing about the pandemic, people are with their family and they're having dinner together. You know, I think that's probably the only good thing I can think of. But, you know, the juvenile court has changed. And as Judge Sanchez has said, and I can't even imagine wanting to be in the juvenile court. The cases that you've had and that we talked about when we met, you know, they're heart-rending. But the thing is, you know, going over some of your cases, you know, I just like to know the rest of the stories. The other thing is, most of your cases, you were, the court ordered you. Tell me how that is. I mean, if you're in private practice and you, all of these cases, a court, you know, directed, how does that happen?
So I'm a bar advocate, or I used to be a bar advocate for Essex County. And what happens is you have to go through some training. They give you juvenile training, they give you district court training, and you would go to court on assigned days. And on those days, if there was someone that came before the court that was indigent, they would appoint you to be their attorney from beginning to end. And a lot of my juveniles were indigent, and I also did adults as well in district courts. I would see a lot of my juvenile clients, unfortunately, in district court at one point in time later on.
Mm. So, do you think, what is your opinion about the age of people going to the juvenile court? Do you think it should be increased, the age?
Well, I know that the age has already been increased to 18 now. I don't necessarily think that it should be increased to 21, maybe 19 if they wanted to do an age increase. But one of the things that I think you and I had discussed is that sometimes it's common for adults to utilize juveniles in a way because there's no minimum mandatory sentences in juvenile court, Or, for example, if there's a gun, sometimes it'll fall on the juvenile's lap, even though there's a bunch of adults that are inside the car. So I've seen that happen. But I think as a criminal defense attorney in district court, young adults that come before me between the age of 18 to 21, I know that there's so many other resources out there for them. And I would always advocate to the judges in district court to look at alternatives, like diversion or like a program, or to try and not have them have an adult record.
Yeah, I just think that they're overworked enough in the juvenile court to add age. And the other thing I feel is just observing these past few years, how many juveniles have raped and murdered people, you know, and what do they do? Then when they're 18, they're out or whatever. They don't have the same penalty, it seems. So that's my opinion for what it's worth. Now, I always ask the nominee the process, how you got here. Okay, so tell me when you applied and when you got interviewed by the Judicial Nominating Commission.
I applied approximately 2 years ago, and I remember being interviewed, I would say approximately 2 or 3 months later. I went to a beautiful, I don't know whose office it was, but it was a beautiful office in Boston, I believe in the Seaport District. And when I went into the room, I can't tell you exactly how many people were in the room. I would say approximately 10. I know that the interview was recorded, and I believe that there might have been people also on the telephone. And then from then, I don't know how many months had passed by before I got my second interview with the head of the JNC, and then also with the legal staff, I believe, for the governor.
So there were probably 10 members.
Yes.
And I say this, and it doesn't apply to you and it goes nowhere, but I am very upset because we have 21 lawyers that are appointed by the governor. They have an awesome responsibility, more than mine. They have more authority. I only can vote on one person. I don't know how many applied. And so 10 people out of the 21 go to the hearing. Never met the person, never talked to the person, never followed up, but they're giving that person a lifetime position. It's wrong. It's wrong. But it goes out, you know, deaf ears. It doesn't go anywhere. But there was a chair of a JNC, and he told those 21 members, if you don't attend the nominee's hearing, you don't vote on the nominee. That seems right to me. But, you know, no one cares what I think, so it's going to continue. So anyway, yeah, you almost went to the 18 months, didn't you, with this?
Probably. I don't.
Yeah, because that
Pretty
was,
close.
yeah, I couldn't believe that date. So, okay, let's talk about some of your cases. And, you know, that they were found not guilty, and some of them you can explain it. The one that, of course, you don't have the juvenile's name, so I don't know how I can tell you the case. It was a jury case, and it was 2015, 16, before Judge Newman. I don't know if that would ring a bell. And it was about a juvenile who was indicted on armed robbery. And he was also arraigned on charges of larceny and assault and battery. And so just to see that, that's on page 9. I don't know if you see it.
I believe it's the same. Sorry.
I mean, there were 2 men that were robbed at gunpoint, and
Yes.
you know, they called 911. And anyway, he had a 3-day trial, and he was found not guilty on all of the 3 charges.
So in this particular case, the victim set up a meet and greet, they call it, where he's going to purchase, I believe at the time it might have been either sneakers or cell phone, which is very common in Lawrence. And the victim went to the location where he was texted to go. got there, and there was two gentlemen that robbed him of his money, his cell phone, and then ran away. I believe when police officers arrived, they gathered a group of young men that were at the end of the street or located close to that vicinity. I did get a not guilty on that case on all three charges because when the victim looked at the photo array that included my client's face in the photo array, he never picked my client out. And despite the fact, unfortunately, the Commonwealth never dismissed the charges. However, we took it to trial, and my client maintained his innocence throughout the end and eventually was found not guilty by a jury.
You had one that you called a mistrial. How often do you have a mistrial? That couldn't be too often.
Not often at all. That mistrial happened, it was a police officer that testified in a way that I had filed a motion to exclude certain statements, and the police officer at that particular time testified to those statements. I believe it was she refused to, it probably would have been refused to take the breathalyzer at that particular time. And I filed a motion to exclude it, and the judge allowed that motion. And in the middle of the hearing, I recall the police officer testifying that she didn't want to take it. And it was kind of something that was already heard by the jury. We necessarily couldn't take it back. I remember the judge saying that they wanted to try and do constructive instructions to the jury to kind of fix the problem. But I requested that a new trial be held, and we had a new trial, and it was a not guilty.
So you have cases with homeless people, right?
I do.
That case, it just, and I'm sure that that's not, a singular case that must happen, but, the woman had a baby and they don't know who the father is and the grandmother's going to take. Could you tell us about that? That was
Absolutely.
very involved.
That's one of my, I shouldn't say favorite cases, but my most rewarding case. I received a phone call from one of the workers over at the shelter. She had encountered a woman that was at the shelter that recently had a baby and wasn't caring for the baby properly. The baby was born, unfortunately, with a disease because the mother had an STD that she didn't notify the hospital about. So when the baby was born, I believe that the baby could have been blind if not treated because he had an infection all over his eyes and face. The shelter had contacted me in order to get guardianship of that child. The mother wanted the guardianship to happen because she didn't want the child to be taken by DCF. So we had arranged to file the paperwork for the guardianship with the petitioner. Mother assented. The problem was the mother was actually married at the time. And in Massachusetts, when you're married, the baby is presumed to be the husband's child. So I had to notify the husband and also the biological father, both of which were homeless. One was homeless in Lowell, I believe, and the other one.
And so there's no name on the birth certificate either.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there should have been a name on the birth certificate because when you're married, it should have the husband's name regardless of whether the husband was actually the father. But long story short, I was contacted by them, I don't know, I would say approximately a month ago, and the baby's doing great. Still, she still has a permanent guardianship growing up. I think the mother has visits every once in a while.
So who was custody? The grandmother? Did she?
No, it's actually.
She wasn't even sure whether she was the grandmother.
Yeah, no, the grandmother wanted custody. She did not get custody because it was the paternal grandmother, which is the husband's, not the husband, the father's mother. And there was, needless to say, not very much stability in that relationship. But the actual person that took guardianship was the worker from the shelter. And she still has guardianship today.
Some of these were pending, and I'm sure that they have been taken up because they're 2018. Can you tell me the rest of the story? The one that was, the defendant was charged with operating under the influence of alcohol. He had a firearm and a lot of things. I won't get into all of it. You can explain it, but it was pending. What was the result of that? How did they,
I believe that particular case, this was a gentleman that was under the influence of alcohol, blew I don't know if it was a 3.2 or a 2.5. It was really high. And when he wouldn't stop for police, he crashed into a few cars, failed field sobriety test on the side of the road, eventually was arrested, and gave a bunch of statements with regards to the firearm that was inside the car. He didn't speak English, and I tried to file a motion to suppress his statements, but that motion was still denied. And eventually, I believe he pled guilty to possession of a firearm, which is a minimum mandatory of 18 months.
What, looking back in all your cases, was that the most rewarding about the homeless
Yeah,
woman?
I absolutely love guardianship cases. Those have always been my favorite cases, because I have done so much pro bono work for guardians. I think it's so rewarding to have children placed in a proper home, a loving home, a safe home. And I've done a lot of work in that nature.
No, I am impressed by all your pro bono work because, we have some that come in, they say, I don't have time, and they have zero pro bono. And the other thing is you have zero for political contributions. So that's a plus. I like that. Your writing is very good. I really, very easy for me to understand. I'm not a lawyer, and it was very good. How many involvements have you had in 209As? This one that I don't know. I'm sorry, I couldn't agree with this one that you had with the 209A, that they said that tell us about that one.
Yeah, no, that involvement in 209As as a court-appointed attorney, we don't get appointed to 209As. So usually those are cases that I'm hired privately. But I would say, I don't know, I average probably 2 a year, at least with 209A restraining orders. I think the 209A that you're referring to was a violation of a 209A where
You drove by.
Right. He drove by the street. Someone saw him drive by the street. I believe it wasn't even the victim. It was the neighbor of the victim that told the victim that he had driven by. But he still was found.
But he was found guilty.
Yes, he was.
How outrageous is that? I mean, I've heard some of them that one time the father waved to his daughter, and that was a violation. I mean, hey, look, some of these are so egregious, 209As. I mean, that's why I'm here, because I had a friend that was in a very horrible situation with a boyfriend, and he was physically abusive. And she went 8 times. She had a 209A, 8 times to court, hoping that she'd get some help. And anyway, the last time she went was the 8th time, and our friend, who was a police officer, went with her to try to, strengthen her case, and said to the judge, she fears for her life. Give him a $200,000 bail. He gave him $200, and in fear, she paid the $200 for him. And my friend, the police officer, said he was out the door, the boyfriend, before him, and the judge reprimanded my friend, and the judge said to her, "You've been wasting my time and wasting the court's time." And she was dead 2 weeks later. He killed her. And I didn't know what the governor's council was. It says counselor on the ballot. I never saw it. And I didn't know how judges got their jobs. And I found out, looked into the duties. I said, I can do that. And there'll never be a judge like that. And so that's the reason I am very concerned about 209As, and how do you determine if they're false? I mean, how does a judge determine that? If it's just vindictiveness of the wife or husband or whatever, that's a difficult thing, especially in our society, So I have to tell you, I said to you when I met you, 45, that's young. I really, but I'm going to tell you, you have more life experience than people who have been lawyers for 30 years. And that's what I look for, because, I'm looking for empathy, I always say it in compassion, and you have it. You really do. If there was anyone more suited to the juvenile court, I'm so glad that that's, where you decided to. And I love that you have, 70% criminal? Right. We need that. We need it more than ever now, So I could go on, ask you questions. The time I spent with you, I found out so much about you and husband and your children and everything. So, and again, thank you for your pro bono work. I mean, it's very valuable, and maybe you can talk on it if you wanted to add to that. So I thank you, and I thank you for all the time you gave me that day. And you're on the Hall of Fame, Belgian waffle. You're up there with Justice Gantz,
It was
God
delicious.
rest his soul, and Justice Hines, and all of them. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Fiera.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Councilor Kennedy, to my right here, is a huge fan and twisted my arm early on in the game saying how wonderful you are and you're going to make a great judge. So
Thank you.
I do respect his opinion because he's a guy that's in court, many courts, multiple times every day. What about care and protection cases? Have you done those?
No, I haven't done any care and protection cases in the juvenile court, but I equate them to my work in the probate and family court. I've done several divorces, custody, child support, guardianships, change of names. I've worked with DCF. I've worked with guardian ad litems. I've actually taken an opportunity to look at how similar the juvenile court and care and protections are to the probate and family court, and I found a lot of similarities just in preparing for this interview. So I think I'll be well suited. I know it's not necessarily something that I haven't done in the past, but I know that I'm open to it, and I definitely have the ability to do it.
Great. Yeah, the judges that I know down in Bristol County on the juvenile court said that that's a huge part of their day is, some of them are 70, 80, 90-page decisions on care and protection cases. What percent would you say are care and protection cases up your neck of the woods compared to the criminal side of things?
I would say it's probably equal. I know that unfortunately in Lawrence, we have a lot of criminal delinquency cases, but I also know that there are some care and protections. I know that just in the past, there's always crossover where my clients may have a care and protection case, a CHINS case. Sorry, not CHINS anymore. They changed it to CRAs, but they also do have crossover. So I see that frequently.
Right. I think you're going to make a great judge and you have my support next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Ionella.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions. I looked at the nominee's resume, had a conversation. I think she's a great addition to the juvenile court. And when your name comes before us next week, being submitted by my dear friend, Councilor Duff, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Councilor Kennedy there?
I am.
All right, it's your turn. You're up.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I've only got about 45 minutes to an hour of questions. No, I already know you. I've known you for a while. I've seen you bouncing around the Lawrence courts for a number of years. We've had many conversations over the years. Your significant other, I happen to have known since he was a kid, as I knew his dad very, very well. Just a coincidence. Yeah, you have a way about you that is just fantastic. I've seen you in court. You're incredibly professional all the time, always prepared, incredibly pleasant, unlike myself and Councilor Ferreira. So I'm voting for you next week, and I encourage my colleagues to do so as well.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hurley, please. Councilor Hurley?
She's not showing us present
I'll
on your
text
screen.
her.
Yeah, text her. I know she's having some technical difficulties.
She's been having problems all day, so.
Yeah. Well, I'll take this opportunity to use a little bit of my time. I think you're a fine nominee, sorry, but a fine nomination as well. We can use somebody like you on the courts for a plethora of reasons. You and I spoke about some of the things that I'm concerned about, particularly in the juvenile courts, gay, lesbian, transgender kids. We have too many of them living on the streets, getting into trouble, committing crimes, prostituting themselves, getting pregnant, getting STDs, and it's tragic. It's tragic that it's happening in this day and age, that children feel safer on the street than they do at home or in their perhaps a foster home. And your experience working within the system, I think, will be very valuable. I know, as many of us do, that those are very difficult issues for many people to understand and wrap their heads around. And that's true. I mean, it is true. But it doesn't allow us to abdicate our responsibility for protecting them as our children, because they are our kids. We're all our kids. So I think your experience with that will be welcomed, a welcome addition. We've got a great team over there. We can only keep building and making it better. Clearly your command of the Spanish language will be helpful to us. I am sorry that you faced a housing discrimination issue, because as a realtor, I can tell you that's exactly what you had. I would also tell you had a contract, even though it wasn't written. If I were your realtor, I would have gone to town on that guy. But probably, as you know, when they don't want you around, it's better for you to find someplace where you're safe. But the reason I mention this is because your experience of, frankly, being homeless, as a well-educated woman from Rutgers University, one of the finest universities in our country, fine school, on your way to law school, to be thrust into a situation that really would have broken probably 98% of us, shows the resiliency that you have and your determination to climb the mountain in front of you and get past it. And I'm sorry that happened to you. But the scars that we all carry and bear, and thank you for sharing it, it's a deeply personal story, really do shape us and form us as people. And I can only think that it will bring a deeper sense of understanding and compassion to you if you sit as a judge on the bench, which I suspect you may. Because that's a situation that probably no one sitting on this council has ever faced. For the grace of God, we've never faced it. But there's a very thin line, as you learned at that moment, between being safe and not being safe. And housing insecurity is just a sad and dangerous thing. Food insecurity. And I think you'll see that in the juvenile court too, that kids, they are hungry, and it's not their fault. It's not the parent, it's never kids' fault. They're hungry. But we should be able to feed every single person, but clearly every single child in this country should be fed, and good food, not just calories. So I'll stop talking and see if Councilor Hurley's here. Councilor Hurley, are you available? I will give her a few more.
Eileen, I tried to text her.
I'm here.
Oh,
Hold
right.
on.
Judge Hurley, have at it.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
I had a delightful conversation with you the other day, and you answered all my questions, and I'm very confident that the juvenile court is getting an excellent addition to the ranks of the judges there. It's a difficult job, and it's heartbreaking oftentimes. I don't really have any questions. I wish you good luck and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Hurley.
Thank you so very much, Judge Hurley. We appreciate it. You have a keen understanding of the bench from your own life experience of sitting there. I think that we've concluded this hearing, and I will be honored and proud to enter your name into nomination next week. I hope to meet you in person someday. I live with somebody who is at extreme high risk, and I also take care of my mother who's 92 and at extreme high risk. So I am being, wrapping everybody in bubble wrap and being very careful right now. And it's challenging because I like being out there with people, but it is what it is. It's a pandemic. If we wash our hands, wear our mask, and stay a good 10 or 12 feet away from each other, we'll get past it. So best of luck to you and your family. And at that, this meeting is adjourned. Go and enjoy your
Great job,
Thank you.
Counselor Duff.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.